You
and
very much.
deliberation.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be with you today. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate your hospitality, and I know it must be very difficult for the chamber when you have to scrape the bottom of the barrel and get the county property tax assessor to be your speaker. That there's nothing more exciting available, but I'll do the best I can do to keep you interested and entertained. But it's a pleasure to be able to have the opportunity to share with you some important programs and services that I hope will be useful to you, and as well as some of the latest information about my office. So if you've heard me speak before, you know I usually like to begin my presentation with some basic information about my office, which, as Michelle said, is the largest local assessment agency in the United States. I am one of 3 countywide elected officials. Everybody knows the other 2. They don't always know me, but the other 2 are the sheriff and the district attorney. A lot of people believe that the assessor is a job that lacks humor. At least they have that belief, and the fact is that they're right. When I was first elected, we combed the internet looking for assessor jokes, but there virtually are none. I guess we're not a very funny profession, but there's a clever story I wanted to share before we begin. So I think most people may recall back in the 80s, the former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. He wrote a very famous book called All Politics is Local. And he, in that book, he recounted a story based on a letter he received from Harry Truman's secretary from the time when Truman was in the Senate. Truman had been a county judge in Missouri, which is more like a county supervisor here. He couldn't get by on a judge's salary, so he asked the political boss of Kansas City, a guy named Tom Pendergrast, for the job as the county assessor because it paid more. But Pendergrast told Harry, says, you're not smart enough to be the county assessor, so instead we're going to run you for United States Senate. But jokes aside, I administer a department, as Michelle had said, has nearly 1,400 employees. We're located through 6 different locations throughout the county. About half of our employees are real estate appraisers, and we have an annual budget of about $200 million. My constitutional responsibility as assessor is to locate and all property in LA County and establish its taxable value. The assessment of property is one of the most important steps in property tax administrations. My colleagues can't do their job if mine is not properly executed. And as you can see on this chart on your screen, I hope you can, although it is running a PowerPoint, but the assessor has a symbiotic relationship with a number of other departments that have a piece of the property tax chain, including the auditor controller, as well as the treasurer tax collector. Kind of the way it works, when we receive a deed from the registrar, we then complete the assessment. The auditor controller tells you what you owe, and the tax collector sends you your bill and collects the money. I'm sometimes improperly referred to as the tax assessor. There is no such thing in California as a tax assessor. That's actually a convolution of 2 separate departments, the assessor and tax collector. So the types of property which are taxable, the most obvious is real property, which includes land and improvements, but also business personal property. If you're a business owner, you're probably familiar with this. It includes furniture, equipment, machinery, your computers. You have to file an annual form called a business property statement. Of course, no one really has a lot to do with my office until they see that there's something wrong with their assessment or with their property taxes. And usually if you're objecting to your property taxes, you're really saying that the underlying value of your home is incorrect. And at that point, my staff is most readily available to assist taxpayers navigate the system. So indulge me while I highlight a couple of programs that we administer and the services that we provide to that effect. Because of the current pandemic, I know that homeowners are seeking every opportunity they can to save money. Probably the most basic money savings program that we manage is called the Homeowners Exemption. It's available to anybody who owns their home and lives in that home as their primary residence. As I mentioned earlier, my primary responsibility is to establish the value of property. So when somebody applies for a homeowner's exemption, it allows me to reduce their taxable value by $7,000, which translates into about $70 every year, which may not be a lot, but it accumulates over time. And right now, if you're struggling, anything helps. I like recommending the homeowner's exemption to first-time homeowners because it presents them with cost savings at a time when they're making their arguably their largest financial investment. The application is available on my website. It has to be sent in by mail because we are legally required to have a wet signature. But every year there's about $30 million in tax savings that goes unclaimed in the county. For example, we estimate that 32% of qualifying homeowners in the city of Glendora have not applied for the homeowners exemption. I find this amazing since it's an automatic tax cut. The biggest challenge, though, is that people simply are not aware of it. And we have worked with cities in the past to see what we can do to collaborate in getting the word out. And maybe the mayor would be willing to work with my office to get this information out to residents in the city. The only time you need to reapply for homeowners exemption is when you move to another property. Likewise, when a property is passed on to another owner, which brings me to another topic and service that we provide. We get a lot of calls from people who have inherited property from their parents, usually asking why their property tax has gone up, because a lot of people are aware that you can inherit your property without it being reassessed. It's generally reassessed because they've failed to apply what's called a Proposition 58, or also known as parent to child benefit. That tax savings is not automatic. You have to apply. If you don't apply, our system shows that transfer as a reappraisable event. Prop 58 allows those people who inherit their property from their parents to keep their parents' property tax base. If you don't apply, you'll get a supplemental tax bill, and in some cases, if your parents are in the home for a long time, it might tax you out of the home. Similarly, this benefit exists for grandchildren inheriting their property from their grandparents in those cases when the parents are no longer alive. There are other savings programs available through the office for people with disabilities, veterans, as well as the environment. My main goal as assessor is to make sure all the people in LA County are educated and informed about these programs. Last year, we saved taxpayers over $600 million through these various programs. And I invite you to visit my website, which is assessor.lacounty.gov. I put that in the chat bar to learn about the different types of programs available. There's a button on the left-hand side that says lower my taxes, and I'll walk you through all of those. We'll also share this information with Joe and Michelle. They can pass it along to you. While answering taxpayer questions and helping make sure that the property is fairly and accurately valued is an important function, I also play another role that is of utmost importance to my colleagues in city government and school districts. All the dollars that are generated through property taxes are allocated to county services, city services, school districts, and special districts. Therefore, the completion of the assessment role is the biggest challenge that I take on every year. We operate on a fiscal year from July 1st to June 30th. Property values are established every year on January 1st, the lien date, which gives us about 6 months to prepare for this extensive document. There's about 2.5 million parcels of property in LA County, about 350,000 business assessments, and we need to update that on an annual basis. It's an important planning document for the county and local government as they prepare their budget in anticipation of property tax revenues. This also serves as an important economic indicator as to the health of the real estate market. This year was especially challenging because of COVID-19 changed the way that we conduct business. But I am pleased to report that the 2020 assessment roll came in at a value of $1.77 trillion for the total assessed value of all property in LA County, at a 5.97% increase over the previous fiscal year. It's just slightly less than last year's growth of about 6.25%. I wanted to note, though, the 1.7 trillion value of LA County, that's just the assessed value for tax purposes. You'd have to multiply that by many times to get to the actual market value of all that property. I need to emphasize, however, that this number does not reflect the impacts on the real estate market because of COVID-19. We are anticipating significant impact, particularly on commercial and industrial properties, as well as a dramatic increase in the number of assessment appeals and decline in value applications, which may reflect any negative impacts on the market due to COVID. As I mentioned previously, the value of properties established on January 1st of each date, which was done a couple months before the outbreak of COVID, and there's a strong indication that next year's lien date will tell a different story. We don't monitor the value of the property throughout the course of the year. It's established once a year. So if your property lost value this year, it won't be reflected into your tax bill for next year. However, prior to COVID, 2020 represented the 10th consecutive year of property value growth in the county, which has occurred every year since the recession began to recede back in 2011. Typically, the largest things impacting the value of the assessment roll are the sale and transfer of property and new construction. And I've included a table with some figures of assessed value growth for the city of Glendora and some neighboring cities. Glendora grew last year at 3.6%, Azusa at 6.5%, Claremont at 6.2%, and so on. The lower numbers doesn't mean that property values are not going up. It generally just means that, let's say like Glendora, probably there are just fewer transactions last year to give us an indication of what's happening with the property values. The COVID-19 market is still performing at a high level for residential property. The median sales price for a home, single-family home in LA County is increased to $650,000. It's $635,000 in the city of Glendora. And there's also a table here with the median home value of some of the neighboring cities. Azusa at $500,000, Claremont at $729,000, et cetera. Earlier I talked about a potential increase in what we call a decline in value application. This is also known as Proposition 8, which is based on a ballot measure back in the early 80s that allowed this. A decline in value allows a property owner to essentially challenge your property value, which is established on January 1st of each year. A decline in value can certainly happen when the market value of a property falls below its adjusted base year value. By law, I am required to enroll the lesser of a property's base year value or the current market value, whichever is lower. And again, remember, assessed value is just what we established at the time of purchase. It does not reflect what the property may be worth today. We've been doing a lot of calls in our office about property values. We've been doing as diligent of an effort as we can in public education to let people know what type of options are available to them if they think that their property warrants a review due to a declining market. The period for filing a decline value application is July 2nd to November 30th. And the reduction of your property value for tax purposes is only temporary until your home recovers back to its original base year. There's a recent study conducted by Alan Matkins and UCLA. It was part of their forecast. That indicates that demands for office space has tumbled quite a bit as businesses are adapting to social distancing norms and a lot more people are working from home. Industrial space has taken a hit, but sustaining better than commercial space since there is a continuing demand for warehouse spaces due to increased online shipping. And we'd be happy to share the survey with you if you've not seen it. I know that Bill Rue is going to be talking to you about ballot measures at an upcoming meeting. There are some, I did want to touch on two of them. This pandemic will surely be a historic event that's going to mark our younger generation for years to come, perhaps even for the rest of our lives. But another event that potentially has potential to impact the lives of property owners this November are two measures. One constitutional amendments. One is Proposition 15. The other one is Proposition 19. I'll start with Prop 15, also known as the Schools and Community First Amendment. It is a law that will change Proposition 13 and require that commercial and industrial property be reassessed either on an annual or cyclical basis, but no more than every 3 years. It's a significant amendment to the current event-based reassessment system under Prop 13. It's going to create significant administrative impacts on my office. We're not equipped to do this type of assessment. It'll take several years for us to be able to ramp up. We're expecting to have to increase my personnel by about 50% and more than doubling of my annual budget. The measure gives me 2 years to implement it. We're conservatively estimating it'll take closer to 5 to 10 years to fully implement Prop 15. The other ballot measure is Prop 19, which will allow homeowners who are over 55 disabled, or victims of natural disaster to transfer their property tax base to their new property when they sell their home and purchase a new one. This constitutional amendment would also prevent people who inherit their family property from keeping the low property tax base of their family member unless they use that home as their primary residence and the market value of that property is less than $1 million. It'll also mean some significant operational changes to the way my office currently administers the Senior Citizen Replacement Property Program, also known as Prop 60. However, with the challenges that 2020 already brought, I'm confident we can step up the challenge of administering this, whatever the voters decide on in November. But I do have to say that if both Prop 15 and 19 pass, it's going to be a bit of chaos in my office for a few years as we get adjusted. There's a few questions that come up a lot when I talk to the public that I just want to anticipate your potential questions, and this will be the conclusion of my remarks before I take some questions. But a few things that come up all the time are, one is, what do I do following the death of a property owner? So the law requires, usually this is for estate planning or particularly somebody in your family, the law requires that my office be notified within 150 days of the death of a property owner. You're required to file what's called the change in ownership, death of real property owner form. Failure to do so can complicate inheritance and estate planning. It could also result in a penalty. Minimally, you'll end up getting reassessed and receiving a supplemental tax bill. So if you don't want to get reassessed, make sure that you file both that death of real property owner form as well as the Proposition 58 form if you are inheriting. Other questions come up like, when does my property get reassessed? Well, the short answer is you don't. Your property is assessed at the time that you buy it. We establish the base year, and that is your assessment for tax purposes. As long as you own the property, it will never go up more than 2% a year, which is a cost of living adjustment. However, there are things that get people in trouble and cause a reassessment. One, if you put your property into a trust or sometimes an LLC, I know that the trust can be very useful when it comes to estate planning, but in terms of reassessment, it is a precision instrument. If it's not done right, our system will read that as a change in ownership, because under the law, a trust is a separate ownership entity. Now we can, if the trust is simply you transferring it between yourselves, you can qualify to avoid reassessment. But if it's not done properly, our system will read it as a reassessment and you'll end up getting a supplemental tax bill. There is a guide on our website called Guide to Trusts and Tax Savings. I urge you to take a look at that. There's a number of common mistakes. We have learned that some real estate attorneys and escrow officers give bad information. So if you're ever going to put your property into a trust, take it out of a trust, you should consult with us just to make sure you're looking for those common problems. One common problem is adding somebody or deleting somebody from ownership in a trust. That definitely will cause a reassessment. Another issue is you're buying property or you're pulled out a permit and you notice that the assessor records conflict with the city's records at City Building and Safety or the Planning Department. The question might be whose plans are right. The cities are right. The city is the one that authorizes what can be built on a piece of property. My department will record what we see. We don't opine whether it's legal or not. So if you illegally built, or if you built a garage without a permit and we know that it's there, you will be assessed for it. But the fact that you're being assessed for it does not make it legal, and the city could come in and still require you to legalize it or remove it. And finally, I wanted to offer two things. One, we send out a what I think is a very informative monthly newsletter. If you were interested in being on our newsletter list, you can sign up at our website, which is assessor.lacounty.gov. We won't spam you with pictures of me giving proclamations to people, but we'll send you little bits of information that as property owners hopefully will be useful. If you're in the real estate profession, we have a special tab on our website for real estate professionals, and we actually do a special newsletter for realtors. We put information on there that will hopefully help you in your professional development. offer you some information that'll hopefully give you a bit of an edge when you're competing for clients in your field. And there's a separate place to sign up for the Realtor newsletter. So this is those are the updates I had that I want to share with you from my office. I appreciate Michelle and Joe. I thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm looking forward to answering any questions that you may have.
I have a question, Jeff. On a previous slide, there was if someone passes away and they pass that property on, they have to file a form.
That's correct.
Is there the same treatment if it's the other way around? If an adult child passes who owns the property and it's left to a surviving parent?
I believe that the property can go both ways. I apologize, I should actually know this, but I don't get that question very often. I believe it can go both ways between parent and child to parent. But if you want to, I put my email address into the chat room. If you want to send me an email, I'll make sure I get you an accurate answer to that by email.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Jeff, if I could.
Sure.
I also have a question in regard to that on that same line. When it goes from parent to child, then our kids pass on. Does it go down to their kids again, or is that a one-time?
No, it can go on through generations.
Okay.
But again, the one thing to keep in mind is if that Proposition 19 passes, it will establish some restrictions. One, it will require that your kids and then their kids live in the home as their primary residence, and it will only exempt the first $1 million of value on a home. So if you have a home over $1 million, some of it will be a portion of it over $1 million would be assessed at market value.
Right. Looks like Kimmy had a question. Okay. It's in the chat.
Do you expect a large? I can read that question. It says, do you expect a large majority of people to be unable to pay their property tax? How does that affect the overall budget? What's it used for? Kim, are you referring to the Proposition 15?
No, I just mean like for this year in this current climate, just because there's been so many job losses, and especially for small businesses, if they're unable to pay their property tax, are there like extensions that you guys are providing, or are you expecting or preparing for something like that?
So the short answer is yes, but just as a point of clarification, so my office is not involved in property taxes. We're just on the valuation side. But on the screen in front of you, I do have the information for the treasurer and tax collector who is responsible for doing property taxes. But here's what I know. So when COVID hit, people were not working, businesses were closed. And a lot of folks were having a hard time paying their property taxes. So there is no local authority to waive tax deadlines, but the treasurer tax collector did have the authority to waive penalties. So they are granting penalty waivers for those who are not able to pay their taxes on time. I urge you, they have on their website at ttc.lacounty.gov all the different details about what you should do if you're having a hard time paying. They are requesting that if you are going to be late, or if you need assistance with payments, that you fill out forms. You need to let them know what the problem is so that they can address it. As COVID continues going into next year, I'm certain that they're going to be looking for other property tax relief measures to help people because this pandemic is going on much, much longer than any of us hoped it would.
Hey, Jeff, this is RF. So just along that line, just to be clear, because I'm a small business owner and I have 2 locations in LA County and I have 3 locations in San Bernardino County. And I know that the taxes are different for different counties. So for LA County, is there a place where we can go and look to see what the forms are that need to be filled out? Because property tax is due before 8/31, and I'm kind of looking to see, and we are closed right now, obviously.
So again, go to the tax collect. You can go either to the tax collector's website, either at LA County, which is here on your screen, or in San Bernardino, the tax rates, Proposition 13, which governs property assessments and taxes, is the same in every county. So property taxes are 1%, plus a maximum 2% of CPI. But when you go to the LA County Treasurer Tax Collector webpage, their splash page is all about COVID. It's all the questions you might have about how to deal with late payments or inability to pay or payment options. It should have everything. It should be able to answer all of your questions at that on that page.
All right, thank you.
Surely.
Doug,
I'm also being Aldo's reminding me that for businesses to pay the annual business property tax statement, the waiver is also available for that, for your furniture, your machinery, your equipment. The penalty waiver.
Got it. I got a question, Jeff. Thank you for your presentation. It's been really informative. As a homeowner, and I'm considering seriously getting a solar system installed. Obviously be permitted. And so I'm going to be, if I move forward with this, does it automatically increase my tax base because I have this $25,000 system sitting on my roof that I'll be paying for the next 20 years? How does that work?
So it does not. Solar systems are exempt. So you are required to, when you pull a building permit, the city or the county, if you live in an incorporated area, will send us a copy of that permit. We will attach that to your file, but we don't assess solar. I believe that, don't quote me on this, but I believe that might be impacted by one of those ballot measures, 15 or 19. Can't recall offhand. I heard some discussion from some other assessors about whether or not the new measures clearly exempt solar systems. I think they probably would intend that they do, but the measures were written rather hastily, and there may be things that they overlooked.
I hear grandfather kind of come into the conversation here, maybe.
Well, if the measures don't include a grandfathering provision, then they can't grandfather. It would require another. They'd have to go back to the back. Either they have to have written into the measure the authority for the legislature to correct those things, or they'll have to go back to the ballot in a couple of years to fix it. One of the challenges that assessors have is that I'm not a policymaker, so I don't have the discretion to make those decisions. I have to do precisely what the law directs me to do. One of the things we learned in Prop 15 with the authors is that they waited until very, very late before filing the measure, before they consulted with assessors, and there's just we'd like to have had another month or two with them before they filed it, because they wrote all types of systemic challenges for us to administer it into the measure that's going to be on the ballot in November.
Thank you.
I have a question in regards to that Prop 15. It kind of goes along Kimmy's question. I don't know if there's been any discussion about if that was to pass and businesses, their property tax goes up quite a bit, what that may do, affect your budget or the county's budget if the business owners just can't afford it.
It's gonna. I think you ask a really important question, and I don't know that that there's been a really good analysis done of that, of the economic impacts of Prop 15. The primary motivation behind it, as you're aware, is that they're trying to get more property tax dollars for public education and public services. Mm-hmm. However, those of us in the real estate industry know that when you make property more expensive to own, it impacts the market. So let me use an example. When I was in the city council in West Hollywood, there was a liquor store up on the Sunset Strip that had been there since the 1940s. And they rented property from a property owner that had owned the property since the 1960s. So they had a 1975-year base value, and the base value on that property was $350,000. Well, that property sold 2 years ago for $20 million. So the tax base goes from $350,000 to $20 million. So assuming, I won't do the annual trended amount, but let's just use the base year. So base year of taxes were $3,500 a year. Now it's $200,000 a year. So if you're a small business that pays a triple net lease, small businesses that have low base year values could potentially be hit very hard. Conversely, if you're a downtown office building that's been purchased in the last 10 years, and suddenly you're reassessed, all of the rent may become too burdensome for your tenants. It may serve to depress property values. So there's going to be a lot of I think there's potential impact on small mom and pop shops who are renters, as well as the ability to command the same level of rents that we've seen in LA County in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the measure did. They factored in a 10% negative impact on property values. I don't know what that's really based upon, though. But the one thing that we know that when you're purchasing property, you look at the fixed cost and you look at the variable costs. Well, for the last 40 years, property taxes have been a fixed cost. Under Prop 15, property taxes will become a variable cost, and that will impact the decision of purchasers.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions?
I did want to add one more thing I forgot to mention in all my little miscellaneous things. So another question comes up about when do I get reassessed? So generally, if you are living in your home, there's usually only two things that will cause you to be reassessed. One is new construction, adding another room or a second floor, or an alternative dwelling unit, or changing changing the names on the deed. Things like remodeling your bathroom, remodeling your kitchen, replacing your roof. Those are, even though you have to have a permit for those typically are not reassessable. The rule of thumb is adding square footage.